to episode 7 of Culture Conversations. I'm Macdara.
And I'm George. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that actually has two reasons for us to talk about it. So the first is that it was submitted by one of you. So Simon Bryant, thank you for submitting this topic. And it's around hybrid and remote working and navigating that as leaders, as organizations, and as a workforce. The second kind of reason for us to talk about this is that there was recently something that Macdara was put in the Financial Times. Do you want to just explain briefly what that was?
Yes, so in the state of Victoria in Australia, they are considering legislation to make working from home a legal right, as opposed to just an option and something that your employer can refuse. So that's been, quite controversial and a topic of debate there. So I think it's topical in that that's something in the news around, whether that should be given as a legal right. I think as we discussed, we're not going to talk about, whether it's good or bad or otherwise. We all know, working from home, hybrid working, remote working is here to stay for now anyway. So that's more what we're going to discuss today.
Fantastic. So I think jumping into kind of a personal reflection first, Macdara, what is your kind of personal experience with remote working, hybrid working?
I mean, for me, it's very much a pre and post COVID thing.
Right.
I, before COVID, hated working from home. I never did it. We had the, kind of remote login, virtual desktop stuff, but I'd never really set myself up with the screen or anything like that.
Right.
And then COVID came along and we had to work from home.
Yep.
So I got onto eBay and bought myself some screens and set it all up and did all of that stuff. And obviously that makes it a much better experience, right? The technology, which we'll talk about.
Yep.
But the whole flexible idea was, something that wasn't ever done particularly well in some of the organizations I worked in. I recall, the only person who really left early was a mum in the team, which bred resentment then with other team members because it wasn't really fair, and I think for me, in terms of today's conversation, what's super important is, to think about, is your policy or the framework you're using fair to everybody? Is it keeping everybody connected? And thirdly, is it productive? As in, is it making sure that the team and the organization are as productive as they can be, and that you're not impacting that productivity as well as, the fairness and the connectivity?
So I think my reflection actually leans into yours a little bit, but it's two-part. The first is, I remember requesting a degree of flexible working pre-COVID, and I can still remember the nervousness that I had going into that conversation, right? Which, looking back now, fast forwarding to 2025, flexible working seems to be available. It's kind of not such a stigma around it. But I remember I basically had to sign my name in blood to get the ability to work from home once a fortnight.
Okay.
And something was said to me that I don't think I'll ever quite forget, to be honest. And that was, try not to talk to too many men about this in the office.
Yeah.
I think, expectations and attitudes have changed around kind of flexible working and the provision of it to everyone. But that's kind of the first personal perspective I have. The second one is obviously COVID. And for me, early, I think 2020, suddenly there was a mandate from on high, initially at a company level, but then obviously at a governmental level, where you have the ability to work from home, you must.
Yes.
I was quite lucky because I had already had some flexibility in my career. I had the monitor, the chair, the kind of technology, but my enduring memory has always been the way that suddenly we went from one day being in the office, being, working next to people, being in meeting rooms, to suddenly, for a lot of people, we weren't in the same office for months, maybe even years.
Yeah. And we went from conference calls to Zoom, and video call that we never did. Right? You just dialed in. Some people you were on calls, you'd never seen them in your life. But all of a sudden, everyone was on video as well, right?
Yeah. Super interesting. Just some personal perspective to help shape the conversation. So, first of all, I think if we dig in a little bit to the FT article, talk a bit more around the working from home as a legal right article that you mentioned. Do you want to just outline that in a bit more detail?
Yeah, sure. So they're, as you say, they're looking to make it something that you have a right to do. Therefore, you don't need to ask permission, and you can just work from home as you see fit. There is a lot of support publicly for the proposal. So I think the article cited, kind of 64% of people are in favor of this legal right. On the other hand, a lot of businesses are pushing back, right? So a lot of companies are saying actually it would affect profitability. Right. It would be difficult for them. It's not, that easy for all businesses to support that, which obviously there are issues in terms of the type of work you're doing and how that might affect them. Some businesses are supportive, some are not. So there's a divide there amongst those. There was also an interesting piece around the sentiment of, kind of Australians more broadly on working from home or working full-time in the office. And 76% of Australians said they would need to be paid more to work in the office full-time. Right. So that is interesting, I think, and we've all seen that in terms of the broader benefits of literally just being at home, right? And the flexibility that gives you in terms of, cooking the dinner, doing the washing,
getting the
being
kids
around
from school
for kids, all of these other things that, maybe you would need to pay, somebody to do some of that stuff, childcare. So, it's not just obviously about where you're sitting and what you're doing in terms of the hours you're doing your work. It's the other things that you're able to fit in around that when you don't have to commute and do all of that stuff. So obviously it's still in motion in Australia, so we'll keep an eye on that and keep everybody updated. But certainly an interesting debate around whether it should be a legal right or not.
And I guess almost irrespective of the legalities behind flexible working, the provision of remote working as an option, where there is a societal expectation or demand to do this kind of thing and make it available to people, it almost becomes a company needs to prepare itself for flexible working and have the right model and methodology in place. Because I think certainly what we've seen, COVID was clearly a very extreme case of where something just had to happen overnight, so make it happen.
Yeah,
we're not in that place now, thankfully, and hopefully we'll never have to go back to that place.
Let's hope so.
Right, but their companies have now the ability, irrespective of what their approach is, so whether it's offering it to everyone or certain people and the hours and the days and the locations, but it's the importance of having a model that works for them.
Yeah.
And obviously we're going to talk about that a bit more and our model towards this, but it's being prepared, being deliberate around what is kind of allowed, what is encouraged, and the structures that are in place to make it a success.
Yeah, and having that certainty, right, for everybody, both the employees and the business, to know this is it, how it works here. Yep. We all know what we're doing. It's clear. Yep. That's super important.
And that certainty is so important.
Yeah.
Right. Is when you have, to use one of my favorite words, specificity in what you are explaining to people, so that people don't have that feeling that I had, right, when it was like, can I please work from home, and I feel uncomfortable, and I'm people have an understanding of what is kind of within policy or what is within tolerance for an organization, what works, but then also that there are the structures and systems in place to make it a success for not just the company, but also the workforce.
Yeah, and to monitor that right on an ongoing basis. Yeah.
So digging into that a little bit more then, Macdara, clearly you and I have both worked with and looked after global teams.
Yeah.
So I guess for people who are in different locations, facing off to people in other locations, they're probably thinking, well, this is no different or not much different to us.
Yeah.
We're working remotely in a way, albeit just in a different country.
Yeah.
What, in your perspective, are the right cultural considerations that we need to think about when it comes to co-location?
I mean, culturally, it's around that connectivity piece as well, so making sure that you have, we talked a bit about in terms of equity around the meeting, so that structure of, okay, we're all coming to this on a level playing field, right? We don't have a few people sitting in the office who are having great fun and the laughs and the chat and it's all buddy, and then, oh, we'll dial this person in or we'll add them in. So that there's this feeling, and not just a feeling, but that actually everyone coming to the meeting has equal, participation and value, and that's true of any location, situation, be that internationally within the same country. So being super clear that, there is no advantage or disadvantage to the location that you're in is super important.
I think for me, one of the biggest kind of aha moments with remote working, but then co-locational working is being sensitive to time zones.
Yep.
And also sensitive to maybe cultural and religious events as well.
Yep.
It can be easy to forget about the fact that you're organizing a meeting and it works for 90% of attendees, but you invite some guys from, over to the west or over to the east, irrespective of where you are based. And actually you might be asking them without meaning to dial in at like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And
we've all seen that.
Yeah. And it's having that conscious check. I mean, I actually, a bit of a practical tip in my Outlook, I have the London time, and then I have a west time and an east time. I use India and America just because they're the two locations that I've traditionally faced off to the most. Right? It just gives you that.
Yeah, and there are tools. I used to find a tool to say, okay, depending on the locations, how do you do that? And I think just on that cultural point as well, around communication styles, one of the organizations I worked for, we had to do some training around different cultural preferences in terms of communication styles.
Right.
So where in some cultures, everyone's quite brash and loud and forward. Other cultures are more reticent. They need more time. So allowing that time on a call for somebody to speak up, making sure you're getting input from the entire group, is also an important consideration as well.
That's really interesting. And actually, if I take that one step further, something, that I think we need to think about as leaders when we are not just working co-located, but also remotely, is that, the trying to avoid proximity bias.
Yeah.
So it's, to your point, the people that are in the room with us suddenly become the ones that we're most conscious of.
Yep.
But it's taking active steps to prevent those inclusion gaps, to prevent people who are either remote and or in different locations falling into our blind spots.
Yep.
So making sure that they feel part of the conversation. There is that team ethos and culture that almost operates irrespective of where they're based.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you think about shifting behavior, then, communication is clearly one piece. What about collaboration? In your mind, when we're operating on a hybrid or remote basis, collaboration becomes even more important.
Yeah.
So in your mind, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. A lot of this, really comes down to being intentional about what you're doing. So I think it needs a bit more thought. So obviously it's more difficult depending on what you're trying to do to collaborate sometimes remotely.
Yep.
So it's where possible scheduling, some of those brainstorming sessions, those more collaborative sessions for days that people are in the office. If you're in a company where
Yep.
Everyone is co-located or will be co-located on certain times. So try and be intentional around that to say, okay, we're going to do our more collaborative sessions on those days when we've got everybody together. You obviously need to make more of an effort to do that when people are based in different locations, but also trying to think, okay, well, how do we build a connection and make collaboration easier in that, so there's a bit of a team building element to that as well. Have you built that team before you try and collaborate? It's a different exercise, it's a different skill set. So before you chuck everyone on a call and expect them to start sharing all of their ideas and be dynamic and let it flow, have you set that group up for success by maybe having some, more fun calls, or one where everyone gets to talk a bit about themselves, a bit of an icebreaker. So, it's about being intentional around the location piece, being intentional about the group and the team, and have you set it up for success in terms of collaboration?
And for me, I agree with everything there, right? But I think just to build on that further, there are such great tools out there now that allow for, or are designed specifically for collaboration.
Yep.
So, it's not just your traditional kind of OneDrive and SharePoint, although clearly a lot of firms use them, but it's around tools that enable and promote and actually help you really get that collaboration right. Again, when you're operating across locations, across distances, I think we've probably all been there, that, in the old world, as it were, you would email a document to someone, they would come back with markups, or, but now I think...
Which version is this? What?
Right, and you lose version control, and breaking down that barrier that might prevent a blocker to hybrid remote working is having the right tools and technology in place that enable people to be able to collaborate irrespective of where they're sat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So something that I've always been very interested in, and it might come from the fact that I used to work for an investment bank, as did you, but it also, I think, is a cultural thing, a societal thing, is the concept of presenteeism.
Yep.
And incorrectly, in my opinion, there is a view that if someone is working in a different location, they need to be watched more.
Yep.
They need to be seen to be online. And I always think of, I can't remember if it was a meme or in a TV show, where someone set up their mouse on like a piece of string to move.
I know people who have, there is software that can keep you on green.
Right.
Yeah.
Not that we're advocating that.
No.
But, that sense of presenteeism, I have to be seen to be there.
Yep.
But what always jumps out at me is that sense of presenteeism also exists in the real physical world.
Yep.
Where people are at their desks, they might not be being that productive, but they are there.
Yes.
In your view, Macdara, as leaders, how can we help overcome that sense of the need for presenteeism?
That's about that's performance management, ultimately, and I've had, this was a pre-COVID conversation where one of my teams wanted to introduce remote hybrid working. And I was part of the Exco at the time, and there was a lot of pushback from the Exco around this, and which got a big laugh at the time. But I said, there are loads of people in the office who aren't doing any work either.
Right. Doesn't really matter where they're sat.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's ultimately the line manager's job, to be able to understand how people are performing in their role, and are they doing their work regardless of where they are. So as a manager and as a management team, do you have the right tools and systems in place to monitor your teams and your workforce?
Yep.
Not just, I can see them, therefore I assume they're working, or they're always logged on, and when I'm logged on late, I can see they're logged on. Nobody should be judged on that, right? In terms, they need to be judged on, are they getting their work done? Have you ways to measure that? Are they, moving the dial on their projects, on their achievements? Are they hitting their numbers? So making sure that you are not using that one metric as your main performance metric around individuals. Do you have clear ways to measure their performance regardless of where they're doing their work?
And if they're moving the mouse once every 5 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. If that's where you're at in terms of managing performance, then you've probably got bigger problems.
You're focusing on the wrong things, arguably. Yeah. And I think, again, just to build on that, right, I think there is as well as how you manage and lead people, there's also a kind of role modeling point here, that as a leader, being seen to, and this obviously extends then to work-life balance and having that flexibility. I always remember early in my career, I worked for someone who they were in one of the glass offices, but I think it was every Friday they would make a very conscious decision to leave. I'm going to make it up a little bit. I think they left at 3:00 and they said, I'm going to pick my kids up from school.
Yep.
This was in the era when we all worked in the office 5 days a week, but because they said that is important to me as an individual and as someone who has a family, and that was their version of flexibility. They wanted that ability to do that, and they set a boundary, and they actually made it quite a public thing, that I'm doing this, and therefore you guys should also have something that you do for yourself, for that element of flexibility and work-life balance.
Yeah, and that goes to the collaboration piece as well, in terms of your team, and are you sharing this collective desire to be flexible? If you're in a line role where you have a certain amount of work that needs to be done, and if you're not there, someone else needs to pick it up. Are you, being a team player, or if you're managing that team, are you making sure that people have the opportunity to come in a bit late or leave early, and that everyone's picking up the slack? Or in the same way, as you say there, as a leader, that you're saying, I'm doing this, therefore you can do this, but it takes the organization to support everyone in that way.
Yeah. And I remember at a firm that I used to work at, and again, a practical kind of tip that I found worked well, and it did apply to hybrid and remote working. We had something called My One Thing. And it was, as a leader, we all signed up to a charter that gave you the structure and the governance around it. But basically, you empowered your team to have something that enabled them to either have some element of flexibility or work remotely on occasion, or whatever it was to them. You were putting in place a system whereby they could have some flexibility that wasn't mandated. It wasn't, you will do this, or this is what it will look like. And clearly it required some level of oversight and, leadership. But I found that worked quite well. It was putting trust in people, which I think is a key word with all of this. To be able to, go to the dentist, go to the doctor, pick the kids up from school, be at home for the plumber coming round, or whatever it might be. Something that's important to you, having that element of flexibility and the ability to work in a hybrid way, so that you can benefit from it as an individual, because knowing that then you will probably pay that forward in how you feel, how engaged you are, and how loyal you are to the company.
Yeah, and how prepared, if you can benefit, that you'll be supportive right to the others. Yeah,
exactly. So thinking a little bit around connection, and you touched on it briefly, Zoom and Teams etiquette, which is not a saying that probably 10 years ago we ever probably hadn't even heard of Zoom and Teams. They weren't even around. But what, in your mind, Macdara, are the important things for us to be mindful of when it comes to video conferencing and remote working?
I mean, for me, it's the same as sitting in front of somebody. You should be engaged, you should be present. So for me, that would be, you've got your camera on, you're not clearly, looking at your other screen and typing messages, you're not on your phone. You are present, engaged, obviously respectful and listening and contributing. The basics, I would call them, but and if you can't do that, if you're busy and you've got an issue, then you should obviously share that with the group and say,
yeah,
actually, I've had something come up, I've got an urgent issue I need to deal with, and make your excuses and leave. But if you can't, give the meeting your kind of time and attention. Either A, don't attend that meeting on a regular basis if you don't feel it's worthy of your time, or if you've got an urgent issue, as I say. But for me, it's the same as being in a meeting room with somebody. The same rules apply.
Yeah, and I think back earlier on in my career, and I think I probably had my wrist slapped for it on occasion, whereby you'd be on your BlackBerry or your mobile in a meeting room, not really in the moment, and we need to ensure that also, is the case when you're on remote kind of meetings, that people feel part of the conversation, they feel like they can participate and collaborate. That's one side of the coin, but then also being there, being present.
Yeah.
It's always quite an interesting one for me, where I like to ask people if they are comfortable to turn their cameras on.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you have this, I guess, sense that maybe someone is not present. Now, there might be a good reason for that.
Yeah.
Like they may not want to, they may not be able to, but I always find being able to have your cameras on, being able to collaborate is important.
Yeah. Yeah. And also maybe help yourself out, because the issue with being on Zoom is you've got notifications popping up. So maybe switch stuff off. Close down your WhatsApp, close down your email, switch off the notifications, and help yourself out a little bit.
Yeah, be present, be in the moment. And to one of your other points that you made earlier, I've been in scenarios, I've been in offices where everyone goes into the office on mandated days, and then they all sit there on Zoom calls with people in different countries all day. I'm over exaggerating a little bit, but I think it's about having those, if you opt to have a hybrid approach to work, you may have a minimum number of days, but try to align those days with, it doesn't have to be everyone, but it could be, I have a purpose for going in. I have a need to communicate, to collaborate, to meet people in person, as opposed to, I'm going to go into an office and I'm not actually going to benefit from that environment.
Yeah, it's that intentional piece and the collaboration piece, and even the management piece around maybe one-to-ones. Do you actually do every second one in person? The others you do via Zoom, and just, as you say, that people are coming in and getting the value of having come in, which is a kind of a shift, right, in terms of office culture, where it was just the norm that you came in. But now, you kind of do need to sell it in a way to people and think, okay, what is the value in then coming into the office? What do they get out of coming in? And a lot of that will be the connection in person piece.
And also that assumption that flexibility and the wanting to work in a hybrid way, number one, means different things to different people, but also some people want to come into the office. I always found it, again, one of those light bulb moments of, I think sometimes we can make assumptions that people will want to work remotely, or they'll want to have that flexibility. Actually, for some people, they don't want to be at home in their bedrooms, working on a cramped desk, kind of hunched over on their dining room chair. What they want is to be able to come into the office, and actually flexibility might mean something different to them. So it's making that provision rather than trying to construct a one-size-fits-all approach, assuming that it is what people will want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess moving that forward then into our model. Right. I think it'd be really good, Macdara, if you could outline the model. Obviously, we're going to share something afterwards around the specifics, but if you could talk about it in a bit more detail.
Sure. So I do like an an acronym,
Mhm.
George. I use them with my kids all the time to help them remember things.
Okay.
Roy G. Biv, do you know that one?
I don't.
It's to help you remember the color perspectives from the rainbow:
Okay.
red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet.
I'll sell that one to my boys.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
So we have the expect
Mhm.
model for our hybrid working model. Expect around, like we said, that certainty and clarity that everybody knows
Yep.
what to expect when doing this.
Yep.
So we here again focused on that fairness, that connectivity and productivity are
Mhm.
key points from the model and helping achieve that. And this is a summary of kind of what we've been talking about, right? But E first. So E in expect is expectations,
Yep.
right? That you set those expectations clearly. Maybe you do a questionnaire with the team to understand what everyone thinks it's going to be like.
Mhm.
And you can really feed that into the process of planning it and agreeing it. So defining when and where work happens, how you're going to collaborate, how people can stay reachable. That's a very important one.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've had those experiences where you're on the Messenger or Slack. Where are you? Hello, hello.
Yep.
So being very clear that people can be reachable at
Yep.
all times. So that's, creating that fairness as well, that this policy is fair to everybody and isn't giving any sort of preferential treatment to any different people or
Yep.
within the system. The X then is execution and performance, right? So you're managing outcomes, not presence, right? So as we had talked about, that it's not just about seeing somebody's online or seeing they're in the office. It's about what are they delivering? What are the levels of trust? I've had people who I didn't trust who were working from home. And, that was challenging, where you had to chase them down, call them out on stuff. But you need obviously that trust and accountability, right? Holding people accountable if they are not meeting the expectations and what has been agreed. So that strong feedback and that you've got that visibility over the progress they're making in terms of the work that they need to be doing. P is people and environment. So really thinking about how people work best, matching the tasks to the settings. So as we said, using those office days to do the collaborative work or mentoring or one-to-one sessions. And then maybe the working from home days to do that deeper work. So, I had that maybe earlier in my career where you are doing a line role, but maybe also doing some project work alongside, so that you would use maybe the days where you work from home to have that maybe less distractions, more ability to really just crack on with that. So having that intentional piece around the people and environment side. E for engagement and connection, working on that connection. It doesn't just happen by accident or out of nowhere, right? So that you're creating those deliberate moments for connection and building trust and rapport within teams and in relationships, so that you've got regular check-ins, you've got checkpoints, maybe you're doing off-sites together if possible, or you're bringing everyone together really to have that strength. You need that core running through the organization to really make this work. And then see the communication and collaboration, so that you're communicating through the right channels. Everybody knows the channels to use and what to expect and how to contact each other. That's super important. Maybe then in that remote scenario, you're having maybe a daily stand-up, so everyone has that, okay, I know every morning we're going to have that call. That's when I get to check in with everybody. And that where, decisions are being made, that is clear to everybody and transparent, so that, if you weren't in the meeting or the meeting happened somewhere else, that you still have that visibility. And that goes to the trust piece as well. And finally, T for technology. So making sure you've got the right tech. I think that has evolved a lot since, pre-COVID, but we all remember the days of someone dialing in, they can't hear, oh, what was that? Or who said that? Or, oh, I didn't catch that. So having the right AV technology so that people are either on video or can at least hear everything properly, and that they don't feel just like observers, that the person who's not in the room feels very much part of the call, or just trying to make sure, as we said, that you have that equity. And if the majority are working remotely, that maybe you do a video call for everybody. So that's the expect model. We'll share the detail around that, but really it's about, that everyone has that clarity, connection, the consistency, and it becomes less about, where everyone is actually located and more about how they perform in their role, and that you have that sense of belonging together, and that we evolve past being focused on where everyone's located and just back to performance.
Yeah. So look, I think in terms of, next steps, interestingly or paradoxically, the goal, I guess, of hybrid working is just that it becomes working well.
Yeah.
It shouldn't matter where people are based, and we'll probably have reached a good place where we no longer need to have that as a conversation.
Yeah.
But there is a bit of a way to go to get there, right? And so hybrid working, flexible working, remote working is clearly here to stay. Our advice is to be deliberate in having a model, a methodology that works, whilst we have a proposed kind of way of doing things. Our advice is not to be kind of purists and take a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's something that you are thinking about, it's something that you're not thinking about, and this conversation has made you kind of, think about, it's something that we can help with. So designing the right size model for you as an organization, in collaboration with you and your staff, bringing that to life, really embedding that into your ways of working, improving kind of the dynamics around remote hybrid working, and then implementing it. Beyond that, also then making sure that it sticks, right? Sometimes having that external perspective to something that, I think over the course of time, firms have potentially kind of just made work over time and not had the chance to step back and be deliberate about having that model in place to make it highly effective and to deliver that performance that ultimately we're all looking for. So we can support you with that.
Yeah.
We'd welcome that conversation, even if it's just an informal chat to understand the model that we have and some of the ways in which that might happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, as you said, some people may have stumbled along something that kind of works but doesn't really work. So it's always great to just have a look at it. Or if you're kind of starting afresh, that's always a great time too.
Excellent. So we've covered an awful lot of ground there.
Yep.
I think probably we can summarize the conversation by, saying what we talked about today is around hybrid and flexible working, a little bit around culture, that flexibility that people are looking for, not trying to look for one size kind of fit all approaches. Some of the thoughts around our model, which, as Macdara said, we will share in a more structured way, and then how we might be able to provide organisations with that support to really achieve the right results.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we hope that was insightful. And until next time, I'll say goodbye from him.
That's goodbye from me.